This is where this came from. Because I wanted to have like nice clean ones, and I don't know, remember the fresh?
Meeting rooms will never die. They're the places that bring people together, where the truly unique ideas are born. But does the traditional meeting room satisfy the needs of the future? It's expensive, fixed, and full of materials which are impossible to recycle. We are living out one giant workplace experiment. Leases are getting shorter, spaces are changing faster. So we need furniture that's movable, reconfigurable, and scalable. The meeting room has been one of the few exceptions until now. Meet Verandas, the meeting rooms you never throw away. We have created an engineered room system that is inherently sustainable, incorporates massive design choice, and is built for the future. Its modular design means any room variant can be disassembled and its component parts reused to create an entirely different structure. The durability of the system means this process can be endlessly repeated, eliminating waste. Here, we have a flexible, sustainable framework able to adapt to the evolving needs of the workplace in a circular fashion. Verandas, the meeting room choice if you care about the future. Arrive, thrive, and leave without a trace.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining us from. Thank you for being with us. We've got a great panel team here today. We're excited for a live discussion. Conversation today for episode 44 of Insights Live is Toppling Convention when workplace becomes a work platform. Taking conversations around with a Gallup poll finding that hybrid workers have a much higher employee engagement, lower turnover preventions, and better well-being. We're really seeing that the workplace is changing from the use case and what we're using the workplace for, as opposed to just going because that is where work is done. We're being much more intentional about design in the workplace. With that, I will start with just some quick introductions on the Space Force side and then turn over to our. My name is Joe Rokes. I'm the Vice President of Key Account based in California. And after our accounts primarily based here. And then I've got my colleague Gordon Fong.
Yeah, thank you very much, Joe, and glad to be on the panel today. I think it's going to be a very interesting conversation around workplace as a work platform. So I am also a VP of Strategic Accounts here at Space Store, based in our Philadelphia office, as well as I work also out of the New York office. So I'm very interested to hear this conversation and glad to be a part of it.
Just going to go in order of how people show up on my screen. So Tatiana, do you want to kick off with a bit of an intro?
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Tatiana Lipsky. I'm one of the lead designers at Navy Federal. I'm a seasoned professional coming from the architectural world and being working on office space design for federal and state government, and currently working on at Navy Federal. Navy Federal is the largest credit union in the world with 13 million members and over 8 million square feet in owned property, and had been ranked 13 times in a row the best place to work at. Pass it along to Amber.
Hi, I'm Amber Warnick. I'm a director at Perkins & Will in our workplace interior studio in Dallas, Texas. I previously was on the client side at Lululemon, leading workplace experience there for their workplaces globally.
Perfect. And on to you, Meg.
Hi, everyone. I'm Meg Craig, and I am the Global Workplace Director for Bentley Systems. After Tatiana's introduction, we do not have that many members, but we have about 5,500 globally, 120 offices, and our headquarters in North America is in Exton, outside of Philadelphia. I also am a seasoned veteran in corporate design and furniture, and I'll fail to mention how many years.
Very cool. Thank you, everyone. And goes without saying, but thank you all for our panelists for joining for the conversation today. Appreciate you being with us. We had a bit of a prep conversation yesterday, which was very exciting. So I know that we're going to have a really good dialogue this morning. I'm going to start with you, Amber, and just I'm kind of curious. We talked a lot about work points yesterday. I think that the consideration that's being done that a work point isn't a desk. Historically, you'd think of a work point as like, this is someone's assigned desk, this is where they go to work. And now looking at different work point types for different types of work, different people's needs. So I'm curious, when you're having those intro discussions with different clients that are either reimagining current space or designing a new space, how are you bridging that conversation or broaching that conversation on what type of use work points they might require?
Yeah, I think you're right. The idea of a work point is expanding from just a desk or an office. And I think it starts with data, like really getting to know the client, data and research. And so we recommend workplace strategy services where we really we offer things like an employee survey, interviews, focus groups, and then we look at like a variety of data points, like badge swipe analysis. We look at if they have sensors, we can look at space utilization, or we can do observations ourselves to look at how they're using their space. So all of those things are really important to do up front to help them understand how their workplace is currently being used. Because I think a lot of times, if you just do a survey or focus groups, you're not getting the full picture. People think that they're maybe at their desk much more often than they actually are. So I think once that data is revealed, and most often than not, they're surprised at how often the desks are actually pretty underutilized, they start to like expand their minds to realize that a work point, like people are really working throughout the office, even in maybe a current state. And so how can we, expand upon that and maybe get rid of some desks to add those additional work points that people are already using? They're in meeting rooms a lot. Frankly, they're not in, as we all know, not in the office as much anymore. They're maybe working remotely or traveling to a different office, on vacation, out sick. I mean, a recent example was, desks at one of the companies we were working with were being utilized only 30 to 40% of the time. And that was actually pre-pandemic. So, people are utilizing the office, other areas in the office. And so once they see that, it really shows them that, maybe assigned desks and, having your workspace be majority desks is not the most efficient or productive, way to use your space.
Yeah, I think the data part of things that right now is super relevant and super helpful, because I think a few things pop to mind. One is everyone's different. So data can be internal to your organization, or even your, the regional demographic that is in one office, that could vary city by city, state by state, and being able to actually make changes with data, as opposed to, as you said, if you do surveys, I think that in general, people want to share what they think is the right answer, or negative, generally comments are negative before they're positive. So I think having that data is super helpful. Tatiana, you were sharing some information on data. Would love to hear kind of how at the Navy Federal Credit Union you guys are utilizing data in different platforms.
At Navy Federal, and I wanted to, it's a perfect segue, Amber, thank you, that we have been using all the tools and means in order to collect the data, to understand the end user, to talk to the business units, understand the business function, and make sure that our spaces, when they do get to be redesigned and they are actually equitable, inclusive, intuitive, flexible, and consistent. Because with all that said, pre-pandemic era and post-pandemic era, we learned that hybrid is here to stay. Navy Federal declares that we are hybrid, and but to to the point of static and non-static data, this has to be evaluated quarterly or at some point and revisited over and over in order to understand what works, what doesn't. And we do have a post-occupancy surveys after we redesign the spaces to understand what's actually utilized to its full capacity. And we use basically similar means, and we do have a lot of reservable seating introduced after we returned a lot of people to campus, and find a lot of means successful. Also introduce reservable kiosks that are also helpful for people to realize when they don't have a reservation, they could actually do that very easily, very intuitively, right at the lobby after they just understand that it's, you know, that there's no seat for them reserved or their reservable space expired. So with that said, that the static data is no longer there because we are providing flexible spaces for people to work. That's why you have to constantly revisit, pivot, and adjust.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's very inspiring and encouraging to see that there is an appetite for adjusting. You know, historically, I feel like office spaces would be designed and maybe 5 or 8 years you'd revisit and see is it working or not, or you would just assume that it is, or kind of do, you know, some sort of employee training and think it was more of an adjustment of getting employees to work in a space that may just not work for them. So it is really exciting to me to watch that data come back through and to see people actually, obviously there's a cost aspect of it, so some limitations I'm sure, but to see the willingness to make those changes for the best of what employees need. Meg, curious, before we started, you were saying that some of your offices had closed and you were still trying to get the right ratio of spaces and getting employees back. I'm curious, in your spaces, what are you seeing that will bring employees back?
That's such a great question. I think pre-pandemic for Bentley, we had two goals. It was just, you know, retaining talent and growth. So we never spent any money on fit out, aesthetics, amenities. I like to say we were akin to, you know, the office in the movie Office Space. Like that was Bentley, right? So obviously, you know, post-pandemic that has changed, but we're also sort of battling at the same time with the fact that Bentley as a whole, ever since the pandemic had occurred, had given all of the freedom to every colleague in terms of, if you don't want to come back into the office, you don't have to. And we found that really helped us retain the talent that we wanted to retain globally, because, you know, it's very competitive out there finding the developers that we need. And so we started off that way and we're continuing that way. Now, 2 years ago, we, you know, our HR department, in conjunction with Real Estate Facilities and Workplace, established a program called the IEWP, which is just, it's the Infrastructure Empowered Workforce Plan. And that was put in place so that we could just set some parameters around that fully, you know, freedom colleague, so to speak. And just this past year, we put people into 3 different modes. So that's the office mode, the hybrid mode, and the home-based. And that is decided by the colleague, but approved by the manager. And so everyone right now is in one of those three modes. And because that has just recently happened, it's going to help us at real estate and facilities reevaluate what we need. And so that's what we're starting to do. And I mean, it's exciting and overwhelming at the same time. But, you know, just to Tatiana's and Amber's point with the data, we do the door badges and the surveys, et cetera. And we are starting to close, you know, the offices that get, you know, one or two people in. It just doesn't make any financial sense at that point in time. And we find, and I'm sure they can attest to this too, that, you know, just generally speaking in the United States, nobody wants to come back to the office. That's Bentley colleagues. They're perfectly happy with staying home. We have so many colleagues that are within a 10-minute drive of our headquarters in Exton. And I mean, we could fill the office with massage chairs and golden retriever puppies, and they'll come in and pet them and they'll go right back home. You know what I'm saying? So, but it's different globally. So we find US very comfortable at home. But, you know, I think next would be EMEA. They definitely, you know, want to utilize the office and collaborate a little bit more than the U.S. colleagues, and then APAC, they are heavily into the office. It's like they actually never left. So that's what we're finding globally across, and it's in the last year, because we've established the work modes, and that has sort of helped us redetermine real estate assets and requirements. It's been really exciting and sort of nonstop. So just to close out that point, we are going for a fully reservable office mode that is from the top down, and that's what our colleagues are getting used to at this point in time.
Really interesting. Thank you, Meg.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's interesting to hear about, you know, real estate that's not being used. We have a client that we talked to the other day, and they've got a tower building down in Tampa, and they literally sublease one of the portions of it, and that's actually become a good source of financial revenue for them.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, on the topic of the workplace being a work platform, and this is both to you and Tatiana, what does draw your employees in? Are they feeling like they have to come in because there is some sort of a mandate, you know, 2-3 days a week? Or is it more there's something they can't get at home? Or is it that team collaboration? I know, you know, there's articles everywhere. I was looking at an article this morning where people are talking about, you know, employees coming in and sticking themselves in a phone booth all day. You know, that didn't really come and help to collaborate with your fellow associates. So it's just this fine line, because, you know, we talk about it here all the time. You know, during COVID, everybody had these 6-foot circles around them. Now we go to the, you know, we've gone out to the ball games, although you and I will not be going to the Super Bowl, unfortunately.
So sad.
But yeah, you know, but you know, when you look at it, we live the rest of our life like we did prior to COVID. However, the work aspect is the one aspect that has completely changed. And so back to the question of, you know, what does draw the associates into the office? I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that, and just in terms of just the Bentley culture, we are very siloed with our departments. So if we have an office that has, we call them lone wolves, right? So we have somebody in marketing, somebody in development, somebody in innovation, and they don't necessarily collaborate with one another. It is very hard to get those colleagues back into the space. But if we have an office that has a team, then they're going to come back in. And it's really sort of manager down at that point, saying, let's all get in these 3 days and work together, then that works really well. And we find when we do have, 2 or 3 or 4 people in a department that can take advantage of that, we find that they come in. But on those offices that have those lone wolves and just one of each department, that's where it gets hard. And that's where we most likely will close down that office, because we're just not getting the return on investment there. And so when we redesign an office, or like, let's just, it's a constant, when this lease is up, we're moving this office, we're obviously right sizing as everybody else is. We're doing those different work modes, and it's just nothing like any offices that we've done previously. And it's to Amber's point, it becomes like the workstations are just not the areas that are being used. It's everything else. And the way that we're designing the spaces is more like a hospitality lounge, or just a really, great, Delta business lounge situation. And that's what gets people in, because it's comfortable. I mean, if you're not going to make it comfortable like their houses, then they're just going to stay home. So we, unlike what we've done for, this has been a family-owned business for over 40 some years at this point. But very unlike what we've done previously, we are spending the money when we right size the office, and we're giving those amenities, and we're making it comfortable, and we're making it, we're just giving them choices. And that's what they're responding to, is to come in, and it's a very open environment. And to Tatiana's point, those moments that matter, those are what people are thriving on. And then they realize when they come into the office after not being in the office that, wow, I had a 3-minute conversation that could have been like 18 emails back and forth. And they're like, this is so worth it. So it is trial and error, and it is trying to get those people back in. But they are starting to see the benefits of that.
Yeah, that's interesting, because that even raises up, one of those cliche comments, but the flight to quality.
Yes.
That flight to quality within our offices, make it something that they can't get at home. But also, those moments that matter. Tatiana, any thoughts around that?
Definitely. So to Mac's point, that moments that matter, that's what bring the staff to the office, back to the office. But when you realize that for those moments that matter, you don't necessarily need to have a cubicle or workstation, that's when you start rethinking your space and reshaping, reshaping environment in order to provide the most out of this potential collaboration. And at Navy Federal, we do have the guidance for the leadership that comes from the leadership as well, to have people's managers and up to be in the office 3+ days a week. But with that said, we do have plenty of staff that works fully remote, and or people who come to the office 1 to 2 days a week. And in order to accommodate for that vast variety, you definitely need to be flexible. You need to have a little bit of everything, to have the ratios that will accommodate that. And after people try that, because we haven't done that before, we either been fully in the office or fully remote, right? So we haven't done that. So trying to take conservative steps to this approach gives us an opportunity and some insight of how to adjust and pivot within the workplace, and increase the actual enhance the experience. And that's what we target and focus on the most when we do our post-occupancy surveys, and reach back out and talk to the business units and have this conversation always open.
And Amber, I'm sure you work with clients across the country. One thing that's been interesting to me is the regional difference, right? So somebody in New York City, their work from home experience is probably much different than somebody more in the suburbs that has more space, that can probably have a home office. So as Gordon said, there's phone booths and I could see people going in, but to somebody who doesn't have a quiet space at home, that phone booth might be exactly what they need when they come into that office. So I'm curious if you could share any thoughts just from a regional perspective, difference in what's required and what people are asking for within offices and work points.
Yeah, I think it's regional. I think it has to do with your own like family situation. I mean, it really is individual kind of whether or not your work at home environment is conducive to focus work. Because we found like at Lululemon, there in the younger demographic, people were living with roommates. Could get really loud. There wasn't like a place to kind of tuck away. And so those people were wanting to come into the office to focus and to be able to take their calls, et cetera. So yeah, I think it really varies. And so I think that's where some of those surveys come in. And I think in general, you want to make sure that you have a good balance of focus space in the office with the more like social collaborative space. Like I know we talk a lot about collaborative space in the office, obviously, because you're bringing people together, you're in person. It's those moments to collaborate, but also you have to balance that with a good amount of focus workspace, whether it be phone booths or furniture that has maybe a high back or high side. There's different ways you can do it without it being fully enclosed to still have a place to kind of tuck away. So we can't forget about that because to your point, there are people in different regions, in big cities or that have certain like at-home situations where they need to focus in the office. We've been experimenting a bit actually in our own office with a quiet area of the office. So in our interior studio, we've moved to free address where you can kind of sit wherever you want. And there's a space. We're in an old school here. I don't know if you can tell by the chalkboard behind me, but there's a space that used to be a classroom that we actually turned into a quiet room. So when you go in there, it's going to be quieter than the rest of the office. People, we don't say no talking allowed, but it's like, if you need to take a phone call, take it somewhere else. Or if you need to collaborate with a colleague, maybe leave that room to do that. So that if you enter in there, you're going to be able to get some heads down work done. It kind of like alerts the rest of your colleagues that like, do not disturb me. I'm like focused on something for a minute. So we've been experimenting with, I called it, library and other projects, but that area where it truly is for focus, very separate from a more active zone that you can be more approachable in a more cafe-like setting or coffee shop type hospitality setting like that Meg was describing. So that's been really successful so far, and we've been doing that with several clients as well.
Yeah, just going to ask, is there any specific trends that you're seeing on your design team that seem to be going into every floor plan? Is there, or, pieces of furniture or, designs that you're bringing out and you're saying, we actually are consistently seeing this particular idea or this particular piece play out? Love to get some insight on that.
Yeah, I mean, for years, even pre-pandemic, phone booths are really popular. I would say like this is kind of in general across different clients from different markets. Phone booths are popular. Booths are popular, like just like they are in restaurants, people like sitting in like in a comfy booth. So say those are so not the actual like fully enclosed, but just more of like a partial height, more like a lounge chair booth. I would say honestly, those two are super, super popular. Meeting rooms, like continuously, we hear from clients, we don't have enough meeting rooms, or just places to meet. So we're trying to expand their thinking around meeting rooms. It doesn't necessarily have to be fully enclosed anymore. Could that meeting happen out in the open or in a semi-enclosed space? But yeah, I think those three things we're like constantly, including or trying to improve the solutions for.
Yeah, we've had a lot of conversations.
Sorry, go on, Joe.
Oh, no, I was just going to say to the meeting room point, one thing that seems to just be a reoccurring with all of our clients is we've got a 14 or a 12 person room and there's 3 people in it. It's never getting used to that full capacity. And a lot of conversations around come take away this row of 8 desks and put in using Boost, a 2-person booth, a 4-person booth.
Right.
Sometimes, as you said, it's enclosed and sometimes it's open, but there's that sense of defined space. Like I'm with a little group and here's our space.
Right.
Yes.
At Navy Federal, we also have, as a post-pandemic solution for seasonal meeting rooms, a lot of people take their stand-ups to the outdoor spaces, and we made sure that our outdoor spaces are retrofitted and could accommodate moments that matter, are welcoming and have enough, outlets for them to actually have a small meeting group sitting outside, talking through the points and making sure that, everyone, it's inclusive as well, taking their laptop outside. So we call it, like, to your point, Joe, the large meeting rooms are no longer popular. They're there still, especially at the institutions that are large, but I call it huddle spaces where you just go and there's a couple more people only, that gives you an opportunity to have these conversations, have your one-on-ones, or have a small stand-up meeting if you have a couple of direct reports with you. So that is just ideal, and that was the trend and the way to go for the past for the past couple of years, especially like post-pandemic era.
Yeah, really interesting. I just was thinking before, Amber, when you were talking about the pods, the boost, it really is that work point. It comes back to a work point. We have a particular client and they count any surface with power in it as a work point. So whether that's a cafe table, as long as they can charge and plug in, uh, you know, even some of the clients, they're using the portable chargers, which are fantastic. There's a few really good ones out there, but if you can, plug in and have your technology with you, it becomes a work point. And I think it's really interesting to see the way that folks are using spaces. And Meg, to your point, absolutely, working in like a lounge environment, it just, there's more creativity. It's not, tied to a specific area. So I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, we
Is there
do.
yeah, go on.
So sorry, I'm going to just jump in there 1 second, but I think booths are number 1 for us, absolutely, as well. And we do a lot of think tanks, which are huddle rooms, but with just soft furniture, mobile furniture that they can move around, and touch screens. So it's, completely flexible. But we just recently completed our headquarters, our new headquarters in London, and that's our EMEA headquarters. And we designed a bar. The view from the building, we're on the 43rd floor of this new building, and it's absolutely incredible. But I didn't want to ruin the view when you walk from the lift lobby. So it's a completely open environment when you walk through. And so the typical cafe that always has storage, high storage, I wanted to do without. So we did a low bar and everything is underneath. And there's just stools completely surrounding the bar. And to your point, we do count them as work points. If there's power, it's a work point. We count it. So every stool has access to power. And there are people that work there all day. with their laptops. And when I've been there quite a few times in the last year, and my favorite spot, and this is so ridiculous, but is to plug in right next to the coffee machine, which is one of those fabulous iPad, everything's underneath, but it's just an iPad. And because I'm there to collect data and see how things are working and improve it. And so I will plant myself right there. And some colleagues, it's a very traveled office. So we have a lot of colleagues and vendors coming in. So a large percent of them don't know who I am, which I love. And so it's great to get that feedback, that honest feedback sitting there, because, everyone's talking to me while they get their coffee. And it's interesting to see how many people will just plant themselves in this open bar area and the surrounding tables for the majority of the day. So those are great work points. And when we were doing the plan, we cut our real estate from 2 floors to 9,000 square feet. So it was quite a cut. So I would say every inch of that space is well designed, very well intentioned, but in order to get those seats in, we used everything possible. And that's what I would love to replicate that design in other locations moving forward, because it is really working very well.
So it also doubles almost as like a social space.
Yes.
Which is again, that way you don't get that at home. You can't sit at a coffee bar. And yes, a Scanomat coffee machine is very nice.
So fabulous. They are so fabulous.
There's a little plug for Scanomat. We've got one in our New York showroom.
So sorry, but I'm plugging it. Yes.
Yeah, they are fantastic. Sorry, Amber, I interrupted.
No, I was just gonna say, I mean, Meg's spot on. It's like people love working in coffee shops. People love working in hotel lobbies. They love working in the business lounge of a airport, like a well-designed one.
Yes.
And so taking cues from all these other third places that people love to work, including homes, like their own home, and taking cues from residential design and hospitality design and retail and all of that. We really need to look to those places for influence and inspiration. It doesn't have why does an office have to look so corporate?
Right.
Why
Not
can't
anymore.
exactly? It's been, I mean, honestly, the kind of period where people worked remotely for so long has really, the silver lining is it just changed the way people think about where they work,
Exactly.
Yeah, I think it definitely shook up a lot of conversations that just weren't being had, and it was a forced, okay, we need to talk about this. 2 things that come to mind. One is just kind of a random story I'll share on those moments that matter. I was visiting a client site in South San Francisco. This is probably about a year ago, sitting in the background and watched 2 folks walk down a hallway, stop, look at one another, recognize a familiar face, and put it together that they had been working via Teams or Zoom for a long time, for most of the pandemic, and had never met in person. Chatted for about 5 minutes, and I apologize to these folks for eavesdropping, but at the end of their conversation said, let's grab lunch together today. Let's meet it, and it was just this is why, in my opinion, it's the people that you cannot, there's people at home and that's great, but those interaction and the people factor in an office space, I think you can't replicate that. It's incredibly important. And for me personally, what I missed when the pandemic really started and was full on is the hum or the buzz of an office. I jokingly was one of those folks on Spotify that had the coffee shop background playing. I could hear some noise and feel like that going on in the background made me focus a little better. But yeah, we've heard time and time again in different discussions that when people are doing some polling, the reality is the technology is great. All these things are important and appreciated, but people tends to be top of mind and top of those lists of what's the most important thing in an office. So yeah, I don't know where I'm going with that one, but sharing a bit.
No, I totally agree. And I'm just going to piggyback on that story because the same sort of thing happened in our Dublin office. We were in a WeWork office for a couple of years, paying a lot of money, by the way. And once the pandemic hit, there was probably 6 to 8 people that came in that office on a regular basis, which was such a sin. And so we relocated them last year to a different building. It was actually the same building that Twitter was in. So it was a sublease. So we got to take advantage of somebody else's sublease. And it was the location, and we say this all the time, location, but it was closer to a downtown environment because we do have a lot of younger colleagues in that office. And we did spend some money, just sort of reconfiguring and reestablishing the sublease portion. But when people started coming in, it was definitely those moments too. And I have my head of facilities in that office, and they said, Meg, it's incredible. We have groups of 15 people going to lunch together, which is unheard of, right? And so because they all come into the office, they haven't seen one another, and now they're doing it on the regular. But Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday obviously are obviously the more packed days. But I think we started out, and this is a funny story. I bought maybe 40 coffee cups for the office to start, when I staged the office. And Owen calls me and he's like, Meg, order more coffee cups because I didn't expect the influx of people in the first couple of weeks, just because of how many people were coming to the WeWork. And so it was just location. It was a different building. It was just all of everything, just like the perfect storm. And the amenities that we were giving the folks, and they were used to those amenities in the WeWork. So you can't take them away. You have to give that and then some. And so now we have 70 to 80 coffee cups, and they are totally used. And it's amazing. It's just such a great story. But that's Owen was telling us of how people come in and are like, oh my gosh, I haven't seen you in 3 years. And then they realize how great it is to have that camaraderie back again. And so, now they're doing it on the regular basis, which is amazing. I love it. I love those stories.
That's awesome. I love it. Yeah, agreed. We've got about 15 minutes left, a little more. So I'll hit a few questions that came in. First one here is, what do you think the biggest trends for workplace design will be in 2024? I'll kind of go around to the three of you with that one. And I will say, please do check it out on our website and on LinkedIn, but we just did a post on 2024 workplace trends that is well worth a read. But Meg, start with you. What do you think? And maybe pick 2 or 3 trends that we'll see in 2024.
I think that, again, just sort of the open environment, the hospitality is here to stay. And the more the design is away from your standard office, I think the more inviting the space becomes. So, and again, we are very much a sustainable company. And so furniture is where we spend the most of our money for a fit out as well. Just because, we're updating spaces, but we're also conscious of when the lease is up and we want to take all of our assets with us. And to that point, technology is one of them. So we're constantly upgrading our technology as well. And which I think is important. And then always out finding the best scheduling and just the apps to make the colleagues' life just the easiest possible when they do come in and when they reserve the spots. So that's something that we constantly work with.
And we've got one other question, Meg, that came specific to you that I think we will add on to this one because you just started talking about it. And then we can go to the rest for the trends. The question was, what was your strategy in choosing technology and equipment and tools to support flexible work posture?
That's a great question. We have a great partnership with Logitech, and that's all we use within the office spaces, within our conference huddles. which works really well, and we can grab our data from the conference room and the huddle room use through that technology in the rooms. So that's been working really well with us. And then they just recently at the end of the year came out with the tabletop schedulers that we're going to slowly integrate into our spaces as well. So with your standard, workstations, offices, so that we can just collect that data. But all of our colleagues, whether they're office or work or hybrid or home-based, will get the laptop in the package. When I started, I got a laptop, 2 monitors, all of the accoutrements, and that's standard. And then, when we do close offices, we let the colleagues take what will improve, in terms of equipment, will improve their work environment at home.
Cool. Thank you. And sorry for the segue there.
No, that's great.
Tatiana, do you want to share? What do you think? What are 2 or 3 workplace trends we're going to see in 2024?
Well, 2024, with all the research behind and the forecasting and all the data available for us, we definitely need to aim for future proofing, for flexibility of our spaces to become and transform. And like it was mentioned before, that office spaces, what's the most important thing in the office is the people and what their needs and what their function is. And it's very important to make sure that the flexibility of the environment is not only in the furniture, but also in the technology that it embeds and that can accommodate and flex around this function that is so easily changed and transformed to accommodate a number of people, or just become more of a focus space and could be easily adaptable.
All right. A little bit expanding on what Meg mentioned with reuse. And I mean, we really are encouraging our clients to just think outside the box when it comes to construction of a typical fit out, with as minimal actual built construction as possible, for a couple of reasons. I mean, for flexibility, to be able to shift the layout, test new work settings, and it just gives you that flexibility to do that. But also for sustainability. I mean, so at the end of a lease, we're thinking more about the closing day of an office than the opening day, and really thinking about what happens to all of those gyp walls and glass storefronts and kind of the built to suit, even all that millwork that's going in these more hospitality type spaces. Could that be modular instead? And it can still, I mean, they do it really well in Europe. Beautiful modular casework that you can take to your next space or reuse it, recycle it, sell it. It just doesn't automatically end up in the landfill. So I think that's going to be, I hope that will be a trend this year, and it's something that we're really encouraging our clients to think about.
Yeah, that's good. That actually leads me to, one of the things that we see with our clients, and even talking about the workplace platform, is sustainability. And one of our particular clients that we work with are a consulting firm. By the end of next year, 70% of their furniture vendors have to have a net zero goal. And they said sustainability is one of their biggest pieces. So it even leads us, as we design, not to put a plug for Space Store, but as we design product, can we, reuse it? Can we reupholster it? Is there ways, if you're going to change it around, can we, put new cladding on it rather than just dispose of the components? And I think, that is also one of the drivers in the workplace is, seeing employees love that, just the fact that the space it's living, it's breathing, it can be changed around. And again, that flexibility. So really interesting to hear that.
Yeah, I love that comment on closeout day being more important than first day of business. That mindset of really thinking about the future and that being more important than the oh wow new space moment on the first day. That's really cool.
Yeah, and quite honestly, so sorry, but quite honestly, in Europe, and a lot of global locations, you actually have to pay to return the suite or the space to how you received it. So it behooves you to do that because you're paying money to do it anyway. So yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, and we're seeing it a lot with, I mean, those exact points, whether it's using a room or a modular wall system to build a room, and also on the things that would have historically been millwork. So banquettes, you know, shelving units, can you do that as a furniture piece? And maybe you're bringing it with you, as Amber said, or you're donating it, you're giving it a second life. I think that sort of train of thought is, I'm glad to see it happening. Two other questions have come in, both I think are great. What kind of sensory and inclusive design strategies are you seeing work effectively for teams that also provide adaptability and flexibility for user agency? Also, about the use of sensors and research and optimizational perspective. So, who wants to take a swing at this one? Amber, do you want to share some about the sensory design strategies?
Yes, I mean, we actually at Perkins & Will developed a neurodiversity toolkit that we use at the start of every project that really asks all the right questions and make sure that we're providing a variety of spaces to just support neurodiversity and not only neurodiversity, but different ways that people like to work. And so, you know, that's everything from a variety in lighting. So some spaces that are more like dimly lit than others, you know, for people that are sensitive to light. I mean, it's wide ranging, but it kind of takes you through acoustics, lighting, and several categories to just make sure that you're hitting all of those different points. I mean, it's even like for the aging population, making sure signage is clear. You know, it might look cool to have like a light gray font on a white background, but that's not going to work for people who have sight issues. So it goes into a lot of detail, and it's really helping guide our designers like from the start to ensure that they're being inclusive in their designs. So yeah, that's just one example of how we're tackling that.
Yeah, we definitely have some great partners that we've aligned with globally in terms of signage, exactly to your point, the wayfinding. So I think, you know, we're lucky that we have those people on our team that we're constantly sort of reinventing our branding or just sort of keeping it updated as necessary. And I also think that, you know, along with that, you know, those sensory requirements, I think it's very important to provide a couple of different areas in the space if the real estate allows it, but obviously multifunctional as well, like a wellness room. We just recently did a wellness room in London that I think it just turned out so great. I think we could rent it out as a little London flat, but it can give people a respite space, but it also can be used for meetings. But it's just, I think, like the quintessential, you know, area to take a break and sort of remove yourself from maybe the cafe bar scene if that's, you know, a little bit overloaded. But acoustics is huge and lighting is huge. We've adopted, you know, those rechargeable lamps in areas that I think makes, I mean, for the cost, such a difference. You know, whether they're the only lighting in some spaces or just ancillary, it just really does make a difference for the whole mood. And if you know, if you're just wanting to get out of just your typical conference room setting. So just these little things make such a difference.
Yeah, we had a really interesting conversation with the client that, around their wellness room. And they said that has been just a huge piece in bringing folks back, just one more of those amenities, having empathetic design principles around the way that we design for emotion, we design spaces so that, again, piggybacking on that third space, what is it that we're coming in for? There was one last question, and any one of you can take this, that came in from LinkedIn. Is color important to bring people back into the office? And I think for us, we have found, especially looking at the way that designers use our furniture products, very muted colors are coming through. Again, replicating the look of the home office. There are a few clients that still buy the bright oranges and the bright sensory colors, but that being said, we are definitely finding that. Amber, are you finding that, or?
Yeah, I think color is very specific to our clients and their brand and their culture. So it really, honestly, it really varies. I think there's room for some bold color, but it has to be kind of in the right environment. Like, I wouldn't necessarily recommend like a bold color in like one of those library spaces I was talking about earlier. So I think it just kind of, but I think some bold color in more of a coffee bar zone. I think color can, just really change the environment. So using it very purposefully and intentionally in certain zones so that you want to be more active could be a little bit bolder than maybe places that you want to be a bit more quiet could be softer, is something that we generally see. But like I said, I mean, like some clients, their brand is bold and they love color. And so we use a lot more color in those offices than others. So it just has to align with their brand and culture, I think.
I just want to add,
I agree
oh,
with
so
that.
sorry, you go ahead, if you want to go ahead, Tatiana.
No, that's okay. I'll go after. That's fine.
Okay, just a really quick point on the color, because Gordon, you're right. I think we are tending towards the warmer, muted tones, just generally speaking. But I also think it's a great opportunity for artwork as well, where artwork was very much not a part of our vocabulary previously. We are making it such. So, it's completing the space, but it's also adding that additional color and that additional texture, which is needed, and just provides a more home-like atmosphere.
I agree with both. And it's definitely more of color is more of a branding purposeful choice at Navy Federal when we speak of our values, and we use it very intentionally in certain locations. When we speak of color in certain locations that are portable or using it on the furniture pieces, it's mostly in order to also highlight the function of the space and what is it for. We won't be necessarily going for a bold, bright colors in the meeting rooms. We just want to have it more focused, right? Or if we want to attract some attention to our core values, so we use it within the graphics and use our brand colors and pop it and highlight it and backlight it with everything we could possibly use within the design attributes. But we also noted that lately, the biophilic concept had also been very popular within the office spaces in order to enhance the experience and highlight the environment that is more welcoming and peaceful and give you that gives the dual purpose for the space, meaning that you can work and rest at the same time using, those biophilic components of the space that could be brought by color. And it doesn't have to be necessarily a plant or a moss. It could be just the color that brings the value.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. And I think color is just another element or a piece in our toolkit to create a tone. With that, we've hit the top of the hour. Thank you to all of our panelists. We really appreciate you making time for us. This was a great discussion. Thanks for everyone who joined on LinkedIn and on Zoom. Thanks for your time. Have a great rest of your day, a great rest of your week. Take care.